Good evening folks, Silver here. Today's story follows the story of a girl named Aquamarine, and what became of her after her life took a turn for the worse. What happened exactly? Let's find out. Also, before we begin, only a small percentage of you that listen to these stories are actually subscribed. So, if you end up enjoying this narration, please consider subscribing. It's free and you can always unsubscribe later. With that, enjoy the story. Aquamarine. A girl seen as being the light of everyone's life. Or so she had been anyways. A cheerful girl who always knew just how to cheer up those who felt down on their luck. Those who felt they would be better off staying out of the way of others. She was pure-hearted. Or so she used to be. But what happened? What happened to cause such a kind-hearted girl to grow corrupted? A variety of things were to blame. Perhaps it was the pressure that weighed on her shoulders with the burden of everyone around her. All that hard work to help everyone had to be for one reason or another, no? But, time and time again, as once said by many to pass, nothing good can truly last. With the mind of those believed as kind, some may wonder if there's something out there that would cause such a kind-hearted soul to grow corrupt as time passes by. But was there such a thing for the one who was grown to be known as corrupted Aquamarine? Yes. As such, that nothing good can truly permanently last. Such happened with the one known as Aquamarine. As she kept trying to help those around her, her desire to help was only diminished as her helpful nature began to go unnoticed. But why? Why was she going unnoticed? Was she no longer appreciated? No. She was being cast into the shadows by the one she thought she could trust. The one she thought she could trust was casting her aside and stepping up to take her place. The one who had always stood among the shadows, buried deep in dread and hatred towards those around him, was stealing away what Aquamarine had been trying so hard to be appreciated for. He wanted Aquamarine out of the picture entirely. But it's not so easy to get rid of someone such as Aquamarine, right? With the light that filled Aquamarine's heart, with a desire to do nothing other than to help others, her heart grew tainted the further she was cast into the shadows. The shadows of the person she cared about most. The shadows of the person she admired oh so dearly. The shadows of the person she thought she could call a friend. But what could she do about this, as she was only further cast aside? Further cast down the path that would inevitably result in her being forgotten by everyone. There was hardly a thing she could do at the current moment, and as time passed, she was only further and further forgotten. Few talked to her, few even acknowledged that she was there, and for that, she grew spiteful. Spiteful towards the one who had caused her to be forgotten. Spiteful towards the one who cast her into the shadows. But who? Who was the one who did such a thing to the sweet and cheerful girl known as Aquamarine? A boy by the name of Onyx. A boy who few thought would ever take such a stand. A stand that many would adore him for. A stand that cast Aquamarine out of the spotlight entirely and into the shadowy depths of the lands forgotten. And, seeing as such a kind-hearted girl was cast into the land of the forgotten, was there any hope for her to gain a spotlight back once more? Perhaps. At a cost, but perhaps. Maybe it wasn't entirely impossible for her to regain what was once hers. Even if it meant that she had to steal the spotlight back from the boy named Onyx, the one that she'd entrusted oh so much. As the days passed by, she awaited her perfect chance. The perfect opportunity to take back what she had believed to be hers and hers alone. The thought of being deprived of such a thing for oh so long had driven her to the point of being desperate to take back what had been so suddenly stolen from her. Day by day, there was brought upon a change. As each day passed, ever so slowly, things took a turn for the grim side. A side many people hate to think about. Onyx's spotlight was slowly burning out into nothing more than a tiny spark. But why? Why was it burning out? What was becoming of this dear boy named Onyx? He was losing his kindness. He was losing his drive to keep those standing strong. But why? Had he forgotten to help even those who'd once helped him? Perhaps. Perhaps he'd been so caught up in everything that he failed to see the truth of what it did to dear Aquamarine. But, as that spotlight dimmed to nothing more than a tiny spark, there was more to be lost than just the spotlight he'd once stolen. Those who had begun to idolize him spoke words of poison about him behind his back, words he could hear echo in his mind after every time he'd heard them so precariously whispered amongst the people who had grown to admire him. What was causing such things to happen? Onyx didn't have a clue. But things only grew dimmer from there on. He began to gain the feeling of being watched. It started out as a little uneasy feeling at first, but it gradually grew to something unbearable. The uneasiness only grew further as it slowly turned into paranoia. The type of paranoia where it made him constantly check behind his back, almost as if expecting someone was going to try and attack him from behind. He hadn't even taken the time to notice one thing. When was the last time anyone had seen or heard from Aquamarine? His dear friend, Aquamarine. What was going on? He didn't know. He didn't even take the time to remember her. His own friend. He had cast her away into the land of the forgotten, without even realizing that he'd done such a thing. He had so carelessly cast her to the side as if she meant nothing to him. But at what cost? Something such as this never goes unnoticed. And should it go unnoticed, it's not long until it becomes noticed. Not long until his mistakes become clear. Not long until he may end up regretting the decisions he has made. As the days passed, winter was approaching. Every day was a nightmare to live through, filled with constant paranoia that something may happen. The nights, they were no better. There was hardly a time where he could get a full night's sleep. A particular uneasiness was constantly only further filling Onyx with dread. A dread that could even drive the strongest spirited people to the point of insanity. But why? Why was he feeling this way? Had he done something wrong? He didn't know. How could he know? He couldn't. But still, there was that one feeling. That feeling that someone or something was watching him. The feeling of being watched had only worsened by now. There were times where he would swear he heard footsteps. Footsteps that could possibly spell his inevitable demise. And on one particular night, these fearful thoughts may prove to be true. The night was a cold one. It was nearing the beginning of winter, and the air was crisp. It was nearing midnight, leaving a certain particular boy known as Onyx to be growing only more fearful. And tonight, his fears would come true. Onyx was alone at home, not even having a single Pokemon to accompany him at such a late hour. The lights were bright, albeit they had been slowly dimming over the past hour. Just as his spotlight had dimmed to nothing more than a spark, so were the lights, to the point that they provided hardly a light that could be used to see around the place Onyx called home. His paranoia had been getting the best of him. He would never leave his room at night hardly at all. He knew he was alone in the house. But why? Why did he just hear something that could have easily been the sound of footsteps? Perhaps because he was hearing the sounds of light footsteps echoing down the halls of his home. Footsteps slowly nearing his bedroom door. Onyx wasn't one to cower, but seeing as what's been happening as of late with his paranoia, he couldn't help but hide under his blankets. The sound of the door slowly creaking open was what truly made him begin to tremble. The footsteps were slowly making their way closer and closer to his bed, step by step by step. But they stopped once they reached the side of his bed. He dared not to peek out from under his blankets. The fear in his chest was rising as he only further cowered under his blankets. And, as quick as the fear had risen in him, it was cut to a sharp stop, with all but a swift movement. Or what would have been swift, had it been faster. But no, he was not spared the ability to have such a quick death. Over and over again, he could feel something sharp plunged into his body. He knew not what it was, but could easily presume it to be a knife or a blade of some sorts. And as such, it soon ended. He knew not who had done such a thing to him. But it wasn't long until just a day or so later, word reached out that Onyx was no more. And for a long while, everyone was cast into shadows. A shadow of dread and misery. A shadow of hopelessness. No one knew who the culprit was, nor were there any signs of who it could have been. But to say one thing for certain, that what was once there was never the same. And whilst the spotlight Onyx had obtained was gone, just as Onyx himself was no more, the spotlight never returned to Aquamarine. The girl who had been cast into the land of Forgotten remained in the land of the Forgotten. No one knew where Aquamarine had went to. No one knew what happened to her. And, had they ever known the truth, perhaps all could have been prevented. But such a tale is brought to an end. A tale of a girl by the name of Aquamarine, who had been cast into the darkest depths of the land of the Forgotten. A girl who had been corrupted and forgotten. A girl who was no more just as the one who'd stole the spotlight was no more.